As of 2025, billions of cups of coffee are consumed around the world every single day. That alone tells you how deeply coffee has become part of our daily lives. At this point, coffee is no longer just a matter of personal taste. It has become one of the most widely consumed drinks in everyday life across the globe. We reach for it in the morning, after meals, and even when we sit down with someone to talk. In that sense, it's no exaggeration to say that coffee is deeply woven into our daily lives and culture. But have you ever stopped to wonder, if we're drinking this much, is it really okay for our health? The jury has always been out on coffee. Some say it's good for your health, while others suggest it may put a strain on your body. And because of that, it's not easy to shake the feeling that drinking too much might not be a good idea. But in 2024, Nature highlighted a study that took a closer look at the relationship between coffee and our gut microbiome. The study itself was published in Nature Microbiology, and it approaches this question in a much more detailed and scientific way than previous research. So, from a scientific point of view, what does coffee actually do to our body? Today, we'll take a closer look at the findings of this study step by step. I'm Dr. SciVera. Let's dive into the science. While coffee is a global staple, it's also one of the most debated topics in health science. For years, the conversation has gone back and forth between highlighting its benefits and raising concerns about its risks. On one hand, you hear about downsides like increased stomach acid, heartburn, or disrupted sleep. On the other hand, a growing body of research suggests that coffee is associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. This ongoing back and forth makes it difficult to know what's actually true, which is why researchers have continued digging deeper. But the 2024 study we're looking at today takes a different approach. What sets this research apart is the scale and level of detail in the data. Led by a team at the University of Trento in Italy, this study integrates both gut microbiome and metabolic data to examine how they are connected. To do this, the researchers analyzed data from nearly 23,000 individuals across the United States and the United Kingdom. In addition, they incorporated tens of thousands of gut microbiome samples from publicly available datasets. This large-scale, multi-cohort approach allows researchers to move beyond simple correlations and examine the relationship between coffee and the human body in a more detailed and systematic way. First, let's look at the data. The results were pretty clear. If you're drinking 3 or more cups of coffee a day, your gut microbiome looks clearly different from someone who rarely drinks coffee. The researchers identified a total of 115 microbial species associated with coffee consumption, but among them, one species really stood out. A single species showed the strongest and most consistent association with coffee. That species is Lawsonibacter asaccharolyticus, but to keep things simple, we'll just call it Lawsonibacter. This microbe was found to be about 4 to as much as 8 times more abundant in coffee drinkers than in non-drinkers. The difference was so clear that you could tell whether someone drinks coffee or not, just by looking at their gut microbiome. So, this naturally leads to an important question. What exactly is the relationship between Lawsonibacter and coffee? First, let's take a closer look at what this microbe is actually doing when coffee enters the body. Lawsonibacter appears to play a role in how the body metabolizes certain coffee compounds, and this interaction may contribute to positive effects on our health. Among the many compounds found in coffee, researchers have identified 3 key compounds whose metabolism appears to be enhanced in the presence of Lawsonibacter. First up is quinic acid, a compound known for its antioxidant properties and its association with reduced inflammation. Next is trigonelline, an alkaloid found in coffee that has been linked in several studies to anti-cancer and antiviral effects, as well as a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. And finally, there's caffeine and its metabolites, such as 1-methyluric acid. As we all know, caffeine is associated with increased alertness, improved exercise performance, and enhanced metabolic activity. So, what does this actually mean? When these 3 compounds are detected at higher levels in the body, it points to a significant insight. The more Lawsonibacter you have, the more effectively your body may be using these key coffee compounds, potentially enhancing their benefits. And that brings up the next question. Why is Lawsonibacter so much more abundant in people who drink coffee? Is this microbe actually thriving on specific compounds in coffee, or is it simply better at processing them? Coffee is highly complex. It is far more than just a source of caffeine. It contains hundreds of different chemical compounds. But here's where the study becomes particularly interesting. The researchers observed a similar pattern even in people who drink decaffeinated coffee. This suggests that the relationship between coffee and the gut microbiome cannot be explained by caffeine alone. To further examine this, the researchers took the study into a controlled experimental setting. They tested how Lawsonibacter responds to coffee and found that it tends to grow well across different types of coffee. Whether it was caffeinated or decaffeinated, brewed coffee or instant coffee, Lawsonibacter showed faster growth when coffee was present compared to when it was not. This tells us that Lawsonibacter isn't just responding to a single component like caffeine. Instead, it's interacting with a wide range of compounds found in coffee, with researchers especially focusing on polyphenols. And this goes beyond a simple association. These compounds may actually be directly driving the growth of Lawsonibacter. So when you drink coffee, it's not just about caffeine. You may actually be creating a kind of chemical environment that can reshape your gut microbiome. At the same time, Lawsonibacter does not act alone. The researchers identified a total of 115 microbial species associated with coffee consumption, many of which were observed together and showed responses linked to coffee-related compounds. These findings suggest that coffee may influence the overall gut microbiome environment and could be related to positive effects on our health. This study takes an important step forward, moving us beyond the familiar question of whether coffee is simply good or bad for our health. Instead, it takes a much closer look at how specific microbes are involved, using detailed data to examine these interactions more precisely. While previous research often approached the relationship between coffee and the gut microbiome from a broader perspective, this study stands out by focusing on the interaction between specific microbes, such as Lawsonibacter, and the chemical components of coffee. What really sets this work apart is the scale and depth of the data, based on the analysis of nearly 23,000 individuals. It's easy to think of coffee as just a simple part of our daily routine, but this study shows that even that everyday habit is linked to complex processes within our biological systems. This kind of approach represents an important step in connecting gut microbiome research with dietary science. At the same time, it highlights how something as familiar as a daily cup of coffee may play a role in shaping our internal environment. Looking at everything we've discussed, it's tempting to think that drinking more coffee might lead to a healthier gut. Naturally, this brings us to an important question. Should we be drinking more coffee? This study shows a strong association between coffee consumption and changes in the gut microbiome, and suggests that coffee may be linked to positive effects on health. However, we need to be careful. The study does not establish a direct causal relationship between drinking more coffee and improved health outcomes. That said, based on data from over 23,000 individuals, this study provides strong evidence that coffee consumption is associated with changes in the gut microbiome. Even though a direct causal relationship has not been fully established, it still shows that coffee, often seen as just a casual daily drink, can influence our internal microbial environment. Importantly, many of these microbial changes are linked to positive health effects. So if you already enjoy coffee, you can probably continue to do so with a bit more confidence. What did you think about today's topic? It's quite fascinating to think that a simple cup of coffee could be connected to the microscopic world inside our bodies. From now on, whenever you reach for a cup of coffee, it might be worth taking a moment to think about what could be happening beneath the surface. As for me, I think I'll enjoy my next cup a little more thoughtfully. That's all for today. I'll see you in the next video with another interesting science story. I'm Dr. SciVera. Thanks for watching.